Hi, I'm Morgan Hines. I'm a senior reporter with PhocusWire, and I'm here in the PhocusWire studio at Phocuswright Europe in Barcelona. I'm happy to be joined today by Alex Gisbert, general partner of TravelTech.vc, Ben Sann, founder of Curated Planet, and Stephanie Daniel, the founder of Legends. We're going to chat a little bit about the startup scene, and I'm really excited to dive in. So let's start with you, Alex. You've got a lot of experience, you've got a lot going on, and you recently started this travel tech fund. So let's talk about what you're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. TravelTech 2 is the second fund of TravelTech.vc. And what we've seen is it's a European travel tech fund. And really, the European travel market, incredibly fragmented, lots of innovation needed, lots of legacy tech to be corrected. And from our perspective, we think Europe is a great incubator of very, very strong travel tech. And we wanted something bespoke, focused and large enough to really make a difference. So we've gone all in on travel tech in Europe, and it represents a huge opportunity. Travel generally growing, but I think if you look at sort of the winners we think of the next 8 to 10 years, European travel tech players will be there, right?
Very cool. And so we wrote a little bit about this launch in February, and I know you were seeking some funding then. How hard is that proving? You were looking for about 50 million, correct?
That's right. So we're raising 50 million. That's going really well.
Okay.
It's really exciting. We're seeing lots of interest in the sector. And I think that there's just so many corporate players particularly that we're seeing are really interested in really tracking the innovations. I think if you look back over the last few years, FTI recently and Thomas Cook, loads of businesses that didn't innovate in travel tech. I think many corporates are now interested in saying, look, I want to be associated with a fund that's keeping tabs on innovation in this space, right?
Great. So thinking about the startup scene and what kind of innovations interest you, right now we have here with us, Ben has a communications platform for tour operators to connect with guests, and Stephanie has a travel DNA platform. So let's talk about that. What is really interesting to you right now?
So for us, I think 3 things that we look at. One is anything that really hones in on customer and customer experience. It's obvious that the funnel's changing. It's obvious that how customers book, how customers plan, how customers are thinking about travel is changing. And I think there's an awful lot of very large businesses that are going to struggle to adapt to that. So I think that's interesting. Anything that brings efficiency. Really interesting to us. The take rates are coming down, I think, on every product vertical. And also the cost of customer acquisition is only going up. So the economics of the industry, I think, are being squeezed. And for that reason, any travel tech that brings efficiency, super interesting. And thirdly, I think there's a lot of sort of immature new businesses, right? So clearly artificial intelligence stands out. But there's an awful lot of incipient businesses that are coming towards us, which I think are worth looking at. Travel disruption, something that we're very interested in as well, right? So, the fundamental mechanics of how people book, how people travel, the economics between demand and supply are changing. And when those ruptures happen, travel tech jumps in, and I think we'll correct those. And obviously, we're interested in investing in businesses that are sort of at the axis of where those things are happening.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what you all are going through. So how has the landscape changed since you've started your companies? What are you seeing differently? What are if you could name 3 priorities in a sentence, how is that looking for you, for both of you?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So from a company perspective, I think, we're solving the problem that brands don't have enough customer data to personalize, but yet today's consumer wants more personalization than ever. So I think, we came off the stage after winning the Phocuswright Global Startup of the Year, and so many legends of the industry were like, we've been talking about personalization for 25 years, but finally maybe you have a new approach to solving it. So I feel like I've seen over the couple of years that we've been in business, a real engagement and a desire to finally solve this problem and openness to a new approach to do so. And I think that goes to the industry is ripe for innovation. And then I think on the investment side, a bit of a trend that I've seen is more funds that have kind of a vertical focus, which I think is great for the industry. And also, more angels from the industry willing to kind of support at the early stage, which is great.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, we're in a unique place in that we were a communication platform for tour operators of all things. So during COVID, thankfully I had exited a previous startup and I was able to put a few million into our current venture and thus focus on existing customer satisfaction. So instead of chasing and spending all this money on new customer acquisition, which is what the VCs love, and growth and et cetera, I was focused on landing a few big clients personally and then making sure that they had an awesome experience so that post-COVID, we could go out and grow quickly. So a little bit of a different situation just because of our own funding experience.
Right. Yeah, that does sound a little different. So when we think about funding, you know, as startup founders, is there anything that you wish investors understood, like when you're seeking to raise money? Is there something that you think that investors don't necessarily understand? How would you relay that? Is there something that you think they're maybe not grasping as you pitch your companies? Or
one thing I do want to strongly state, and I don't hear, is the level of enthusiasm amongst customers. And you often hear about growth rates, profitability, margins, and one of the metrics I like to say is the expansion of your clients when they go live with the pilot. Are they fully embedded and invested, a year later? And that to me is the best metric that I look for. I don't know, I haven't heard really VCs looking at that, and I'm sure they do, but it's super important to us.
Like customer engagement. Like true.
But true, not just engagement, but expansion and the level for each customer of how much additional money they're spending month over month.
Right. Yeah. I think there's that, like travel is such a huge industry, right? 10% of the world's GDP, but it's complex. And so I think there's this challenge of it does take some vertical specific investors to really understand it and really be comfortable with some of the solutions. But at the same time, I think there are other investors that are more generalist, that see the opportunity in the space. So I wish that more generalists were more comfortable with the sector earlier. They get there later, right? But that's once you've reached the inflection point, you're like, well, you could have got involved earlier. So there's a bit of a gap there.
On the stage you're both at, I think there's, I think you don't underestimate the value of smart money, right? Of investors coming in who really understand the sector.
Yeah.
And also you've got complex products to get across. So absolutely sort of having investors that have done it before.
Totally.
Or have a network that can push you into the right direction faster.
Yeah.
Like you said, landing still 2-3 big customers early on makes a difference.
Yeah.
You're more likely to do that with someone on your board or an investor that can actually do that. So I think, and there's more smart money around now than there was when I set up my business in 2015, right? Yeah. Where we were trying to tell people, okay, so connectivity with hotels works this way, right?
Yeah.
Those conversations happen less now, and people really understand that. So I think that there's more smart money type investing around, and I would suggest lots of businesses at your stage should be looking for those. Right?
Yeah. I think it's been a focus for us to get the right investors with that kind of perspective on board. Also, our advisory board with a lot of folks from the industry that bring a great lens, and then getting engaged with platforms like Phocuswright to help kind of connect with the right people in the ecosystem.
And Morgan, this concept of advisory board, I think, is also a really interesting. I don't know if you have one, but I think what Stephanie's mentioning is we have an advisory board even for ourselves, right? We have 80 businesses that form part of our advisory board, but I'm hearing that a lot over the course of the last few months. More and more businesses saying, I have an advisory board, sometimes with some kind of phantom shares or virtual shares. Sometimes they're just involved, right? And investors and travel executives, they just want to learn from you, right? And they're inspired by spending time with you. But more and more businesses at your stage, I think, are now above and beyond sort of a formal investment board, are really relying on some kind of advisory board for people to call. And that seems very common practice. I think, everyone should be thinking, who are actually my advisors? Who can I call? And it's interesting talking to a business yesterday saying, well, I had advisors for the first year, I got rid of them, now I've got some new advisors.
Yeah.
And not in a callous way, but in a very fair way.
Well, the company evolves, and so the skill set and experience that's most relevant
and
evolves.
The advice you need might change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've had that setup. We've evolved it over time. We have formal advisors and informal advisors. And that's one of the things I love about this industry, right? There's so many people that are excited by the innovation and willing to share the benefit of their experience.
And don't underestimate that all of those advisors are gaining from you, and they're possibly been doing what they've been doing for 20, 25 years, and they'll be extremely excited about spending time with you guys and going, oh wow, this is like a whole new approach. I don't want to be disintermediated from that knowledge, right?
Exactly.
And they'll enjoy spending time with you, and there is a value exchange there. It's not one-way traffic.
We did that in the past year, 2 amazing advisors because we're self-funded. So those are my eyes and ears for the industry, and they've referred some amazing clients our way, and it's the best thing we ever did.
Yep.
So I completely agree.
Yeah, and there is an awful lot of innovation. There are some really post-pandemic sort of huge customer trends that are changing. So we are, all of us, treading somewhat of an uncharted path, right? So, and even if you do understand the last 20 years of history from some of the advisors you may choose, the likelihood is no one knows what's coming and how it's going to shake out, right? So getting a good cross-reference of advisory and saying, look, here are my bets, and this is what I think is really smart, and I think what you guys are doing makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So thinking about it from where you're standing now, what are the challenges as an investor that you sometimes face with startups, and maybe, like we talked about, what investors might not understand, what might founders not understand that's important to bring to the table?
So obviously we invest in growth stage businesses, and I think there is sometimes we do come across businesses that just fail to give us that extra level of detail that should really show us how the growth plan is going to work. And where that detail is, sort of like, it's a great idea, we're great people, the market is huge, and something magical will happen between those 3 points, right? And I think, and also by the very definition, there's a lot of very forceful and strong-willed and entrepreneurs, right? But you do need a little bit more than that. You do need that next level of detail that says, and here is the plan.
This is how we get there. Yeah.
And here are the buttons, right?
Yeah.
I'm surprised sometimes we don't see enough of that. And that's a challenge because it's there, but our role is obviously not to frame it. And then secondly, I think there is, any fund has a lifetime. So for us, it's really important to understand how these businesses are going to be resilient over time. And I think obviously by their very nature, a lot of these businesses are looking for funding because they're trying to exist for the next 12 to 18 months. But thinking ahead 5 years plus is always going to be a challenge. And not all the founders I meet certainly are thinking sort of that way, right?
Yeah. So I guess thinking about timelines, we're about halfway through 2024 now. What are your biggest priorities for the next year, and maybe some challenges that you're anticipating and how you might deal with them?
Sure. I'll go quickly. Our 3 pillars are: one, on the product side, we continue to evolve and iterate based on our customer feedback. So we started with photo as a source, now we have calendar, and we're continuing to expand that. Secondly is customers. So we're live with our first customers, but we're really focusing on who are the right next partners to bring through our funnel to actually implement, to have great case studies. And we're fortunate to have really great engagement with some very large enterprises, as well as some more medium. So just balancing where we focus our time there, because we can't do it for everyone. And then third, on the funding, we're in the middle of closing a round right now. So yeah, it's a busy year.
Very simple. Getting to break even and 7-figure ARR. We're bootstrapped, so we wanna make money as a business.
Yeah, that's a very fair goal. And I guess to go back a little bit, Stephanie, it's been almost 8 months since you were named part of PhocusWire's Hot 25 for 2024 for travel startups. Sorry, I'm all garbled, but PhocusWire's Hot 25 travel startups for 2024. So tell me a little bit about how things have progressed since then. I know we just talked about the future, but how do you feel your progress has been in the last 8 months?
Yeah, I mean, if we take it on those pillars that I mentioned, right? Since then, we're live with our first customers. Yeah. We have gone live with a new product, and we have, we're almost done on the funding round as well. So
that's very exciting. And so I guess thinking even longer term, what are both of your goals? Are you looking to exit, or are you looking to stay on eventually? How do you see things playing out?
What I find so exciting about the travel is the potential scale, right, of what we're building, and that's so. I believe we're building a scale company that can go all the way to IPO. At the same time, it's a highly acquisitive business, and we have a lot of strategic partners, and there's a lot of paths that it could take. So we'll continue to evaluate what makes sense for all our stakeholders. Also, what we're building is bigger than travel, because it's for every brand that needs to touch a consumer. It's a new data solution. So, there's a path where we can expand there as well.
And you mentioned you've been through an exit before, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so are you hoping to do the same thing?
Been there, done that. That's great.
Yeah.
Trying to build a really good business as opposed to seeking the next funding round. So I know we're talking about startups, but I'm focused on something else, having already done that exit and been through. I don't want to make another X million and have it sitting in the bank. I want to do something really fun and impactful for tour operators and be involved in the hands and on nitty gritty of the business. That's what I enjoy.
Yeah. And I think kind of as we wrap things up here, one thing, what's your biggest piece of advice for startup founders now that you've kind of come full circle?
Other than have a plan.
Yeah, other than have a plan. Yeah.
Look, I think don't get caught up in the jargon, and just approach everything with a lot of integrity.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to be dealing with a huge amount of very, very smart investors, and I think loads of those investors will work it all out. Right. So it's best to go open hands and say, look, these are my challenges. Here's the good. Here's the bad, because ultimately they're going to have to work with you for years to come. So start as you mean to go on.
Yeah.
Approach things with a huge amount of integrity. And they are relationships. You have a relationship now currently probably with your co-founders. It's a slightly different relationship with investor, but from a paperwork perspective, you're all shareholders, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there has to be a huge amount of integrity in your approach.
Yeah.
When I sit down in conversations and someone just shows me B2B SaaS metrics for an hour,
You're like, we're humans, actually.
I kind of feel like that falls down. TravelTech.2 are 5 entrepreneurs, and we're all general partners. We're all entrepreneurs first, and VC investors, by definition. But really, we're entrepreneurs at heart. So, entrepreneur to entrepreneur talk is really, really important. So, my advice is approach things with integrity, because ultimately, it's a journey, right? And it is a marathon, not a sprint, which is obvious. But absolutely, be yourselves.
Yeah,
I think that's
that authenticity leads to the best connection. Those investors, partners, team. That leads to the best foundation.
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely key.
Yeah, and I can't thank you all enough for being authentic with me today. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Morgan. Thank you. Well done, guys.